The Leica story begins with Oskar Barnack, and he was born on 1st of November 1879. He was a German engineer. He died unfortunately at the age of 56 already, and he worked for Light's company. And by the way, Leica is an artificial word created from the first 3 letters of Lights and the first 2 letters from camera. Leica dedicated a special version of the M10-P to the 100th anniversary of the founding of the American Society of Cinematographers. And this very special camera is what we are going to consider in this video. Early in 1919, and in parallel to the foundation of the ASC, Oskar Barnack invented what we would call today the full frame format. And this laid the foundation for his Ur-Leica, and the Ur-Leica is the foundation for everything we see today in the modern lineup of Leica cameras. And by the way, these very early Leicas, they are very expensive. So what you see here is a Leica camera from 1923, which was sold at an auction for close to $3 million. So Leica has good reasons and all justification of the world to dedicate to 1919 a special edition of their Leica M10-P. So I have this Leica here in a box. I'm going to unbox it, open it, I'm going to show it. I'm also going to introduce people to that camera. I will briefly go into the menu, in the settings, I will set up the camera. I will explain how a rangefinder works and what additional focusing aids you can use for a camera of this type. And conclude the video at the end with a few sample photos taken with Leica lenses, just to show what these beautiful rangefinder cameras are capable of delivering to you. So here it is. In this box here is, I think, the best rangefinder camera Leica ever made, and it's also, but that's a matter of taste of course, the most beautiful rangefinder camera Leica ever made. And if we get a bit closer to the camera, we see it here, it's a Leica M10-P. It's the ASC 100 edition. It's a camera which has been announced, I think, in February by Leica, but now just hit the market. It's limited to 300 units. It comes with a Summicron M, widest open aperture is 2. That's one of the standard lenses from Leica. Beautiful, very sharp, very good optical quality, 35 millimeters. And it also includes a free VisoFlex Type 020, which is an electronic viewfinder which you can mount on the hot shoe of the camera, doing photos without using the rangefinder, but just with a more modern electronic viewfinder. I'm not using that very often on my Leica cameras because that's the beauty of it. If you have a rangefinder camera, why should you use an EVF? But anyway, let's get started. Let's open the box, let's see what's inside, and then let's go out there and shoot with that camera. So the next thing we are doing is actually getting a hand grip on the camera. So we open the original bottom plate here. Inserting a battery. This one is freshly charged. And also inserting an SD card. And then mounting that hand grip here, which is for the M10P. So we have much better grip. Okay, that looks good. Actually, that metal finish at the bottom looks really good. So since it is mounted now, the camera is actually ready for going out there and doing a shooting. What I like a lot, just spending a moment longer on the body here, this ASC engraving on top of the body is just very beautiful. And the same way as the lens. So that Summicron here is a very nice, very solid and very sharp and optically perfect lens. And listen to that sound here. I try to show this. Can you hear the aperture ring? This is so much better than control wheels in modern DSLRs or DSLMs. Much, much better. This is the ISO wheel here. And you see all the engravings are black on black, which might make it hard under certain light conditions to actually see what you're doing. But of course you have the control in the LCD here. So you see what's going on. You have to pull this up like always for the M10P and then you can turn it. So this is now 200 ISO and so on. There's also the automatic mode for ISO, but I hardly use that. I typically know what ISO value I want to have. Here is the control wheel for the exposure time. Again, engraved black on black. Beautiful design. And since you see in the LCD screen what you actually turn, it's all perfect and good. The whole design of the camera is very minimalistic. Look at the texture here. There is very good grip, but I nevertheless like my hand grip here because that gives me a much firmer grip if I have the camera in my hand. This is really good. It's solid. It can't slip away. Look at the shutter button here. Quite nice. And in general, if you look at that camera, I mean, let's agree, right? This is just a beauty. It's just a wonderful camera. And since the M10P, in my opinion, but I think many people will probably agree, is the best rangefinder camera Leica ever made, combined with this design, it's just a perfect piece of photographic technology. You saw in the time lapse before when I mounted the camera that I mounted this lens hood here. And it's a very old school lens hood. Look at that design here. With that golden color, just perfect. Very, very nice. Very nice design. Also very solid. So this is all metal here. It's very good. Leica type quality like we are used to it from many, many other cameras. So the next thing I want to do is actually I want to start the camera for the first time. Want to briefly look at the menu. I know the M10P, but a few adjustments typically have to be made. And I also want to check the firmware. I downloaded the most recent firmware already to the SD card, which I injected into the camera. And let's see if it needs a system or firmware update or not. So let's switch on the camera for the first time. You see the control LED going on here. I typically like to have this in English. So my time zone is Paris, Berlin, Wetzlar. And then date, you see this goes back to 2018. We can choose here. I have it day, month, year. That's what I want to have. Then we have here 2019, of course. We have currently November. And we have, I think, the 16th of November. Time format, 24 hours is fine for me. And then the time, let's quickly look this up here on the smartphone. Time currently is 2:45 p.m. So let's go up here. That's then a 40. And 45 goes down. Very good. So let's go into the menu. The menu button is the lowest one here. Drive mode, single shot is good for me. I keep it that way. Exposure compensation off. Flash we don't need. ISO, I can use the wheel here to turn this. Let's keep it at auto for the time being. But when I later shoot, I typically adjust the ISO like I want it and don't leave it to the camera to decide. As I mentioned before, auto white balance is fine. File format should be digital negative and JPEG. And now here, this is special. I'm going to mention this special. This is the Cine Classic look and the Cine Contemporary look. I come to that later. Cine Frameline, we come to that later. Let's go to the main menu. Lens detection auto is fine. Exposure metering I need to have at spot because I need to know where I'm metering here. Then spot. So here we go. Exposure compensation off, flash, blah, blah, blah. White balance, that's all good. JPEG settings, we take 24 megapixel. We do not mess around with contrast, sharpness and saturation because that's something I can adjust later in post. But nevertheless, your JPEGs, you can also influence here with respect to these ASC settings here. And as I said, I come back to this later. Auto review, I want to have on hold. And then when I push the shutter button, it's basically removing the preview. And then we have here, what else do we have? Capture assistant, that is important. I like focus peaking a lot. I want to have this in blue. And histogram, I don't need typically, so we switch this off. Exposure clipping, I don't want to have that. So let's try to get this off. Grids is good, 3x3. Exposure simulation, release half press, that's fine. Focus aid, automatic, level gauge, that's something I need on. Cinematic frame lines, we come to that later because that's all related to that special edition ASC, and that should actually create a different section or topic of my video here. All right, I think for the time being, not too bad. Let's see what else we have here. EVF display control, we can go through this later. Customized controls, all of that can be adjusted later. Not important for the first shooting. Leica photos, that's for the iOS or Android app. Auto power is fine. Date and time we did. They brought up a firmware for the Leica M10-P, I think in September this year, which is something I want to quickly check here. So what does it say here? No, it's grayed out. That means the firmware is already good. So basically we are good to go. So the Leica Rangefinder is a beautiful optical instrument, and I'm going to demonstrate now how to do this. I will use two iPhones. One iPhone is the perspective you see here on display, where I'm going to show from the top what I'm adjusting on the camera. And the second iPhone, which is the red one you see here in the video, is mounted right in front of the rangefinder, the viewfinder, to actually show how this focusing method works. Let's get started. So when you look through the viewfinder of a Leica M series camera, then everything is sharp. Your foreground, your background, your subject, everything is sharp. And that's different to a DSLR, where focusing happens through the lens, or in shortcut TTL, as people call it in photography. What you see in kind of the middle is the focus indicator rectangle, and there is special terminology for this, but you can shift this around via the focus ring of the lens, and you can see this here on the right hand side in the way I'm turning the focus wheel of the lens of the camera. And your subject will be in focus when the replicated image in that little rectangle, which I can shift, perfectly matches your subject. So here's the image we just took. On the left hand side is the metadata from the digital negative. Let's quickly zoom in to see if the subject really is in focus. And yes, I would say this is pretty much in focus, and don't forget this has been shot with a wide open aperture of f2, which already shows the optical qualities of that Summicron lens. Okay, so let's do this again. Let's shift this little rectangle until we match the subject. Deal done, perfect. Last thing I want to demonstrate is look at my hand on the right hand side coming to the front side of the camera body to that switch, and when I push that switch, it changes the illuminated frames in the viewfinder. And this is what I skipped when I went at the beginning through the menu of the camera. So let's go into the menu, and then you have here on the main page of your favorites, you have here the ASC Cine Classic look and the ASC Cine Contemporary look. And those two you can activate. They are mutually exclusive. So if you have this one here on, this one here is grayed out. Let's switch this off. If this one is on here, so the contemporary one, the other one is grayed out. And then you have settings here, and you can choose now a cinematic frame line. And that's something which people used in, let's say, many years ago when they had to find out what is more image composition in taking a video when I do filming. And they use these kind of viewfinders, which brings us back to the roots of the ASC, which I mentioned in the trailer or the beginning of my video. So we can go into this one here and can say frame line. Currently it's off, but then I can go to presets. And under presets, you have all kinds of predefined video formats which you can choose here. So let's take this one, for instance, and then we go back, and then you see here that you have that frame here, and that gives you the orientation you want to have. You can also customize this by, for instance, going into settings, and then you could, for instance, say you want to have this in, you know, let's say green color. And then if you go here, this is in green color, which is a little bit of a toy, but it's fine and nice to have. You also find this under capture settings. So if I go into the menu, and let's just quickly go here to the main menu. And then I think on the second page are your capture settings, or capture assistance as it is called here. And then you see it actually here at the bottom, cinematic frame line. And then you can choose again what you want. You also see here two user frame line ones. So for example, if you want to have, let's go into settings, and you want to pre-specify one user setting. So you have two basically settings you can store here. And you go into user frame line 1, then you see you can here specify the width and the height. And in this case, it's adjusted to be the full frame sensor. But if I go on that, I can actually enter my own value and can so create pre-specified frames to be shown in the live view of the camera, or then later also in the viewfinder here of the rangefinder camera, which is quite nice. So let's go back and let's for a moment say, instead of having here the pre-specified format, let's use user frame line 1, and then it should give me the full rectangle here, because in the live view on the LCD it replicates the full frame sensor, which is 24 times 36. So let's choose that one here. Let's go back. And now you see it here when I have the lens cap on here, but if I push the shutter button, it shows me a green rectangle replicating the full size of the 36 times 24 millimeter full frame sensor. And that's the way you can customize this. So very nice. As I said, it's a little bit of a gimmick if you don't have to work professionally in videography. And of course, today we have other ways in the video camera itself to show these compositions and framings. But it is nice to have, and it's a homage back to those years in 1919 when the ASC and other videographers started to work with this kind of, at this point in time, new technology. Shipped with the camera actually is this little thing here, and that's an electronic viewfinder. So it's the VisoFlex. You see it here. You mount it on the hot shoe of the camera, and then you have a normal electronic viewfinder where you have exposure preview, where you have focus peaking in the same way as you have it here on the LCD. And then you have, let's say, a more modern way of focusing, but it takes away, you know, the nostalgic, charming character of a rangefinder camera. So that's another option we have. That here was shipped, I said before when we looked at the box at the beginning, for free, but given the price tag of that camera, it's probably a bit of a joke to say it's for free. They can easily afford to pack this into the box here. Another way to focus a rangefinder camera is via zone or range focusing, and that works as follows. So here we have the aperture ring. Let's say we go to an aperture of 5.6, and then we move the focus ring in a way that, for instance, let's see if this lines up. So if we have infinity at 5.6, then everything between, let's say, 3 meter 20 and infinity will be sharp. Let's do this for a fairly well closed aperture 11. So if we go now with the infinity sign until we reach f11, then everything between infinity, so up to the horizon, and if we go here to 11, it ends up between 1.5 and 2 meters. So let's say 1.7, 1.8 meters, then everything between 1.8 meters and infinity will be sharp. And then besides the usual accessories, what was also shipped with the camera is that thing here. So that's a very heavy, very large adapter. And here you mount the M camera, so that's the M10-P with the M mount. And here you can mount PL lenses. And these are cinematic lenses, which are used for videography. And I show an example in a moment in a picture. And that's, if you want to use cinematic lenses on that camera, you can do so. I think it's more a gimmick because the Leica M10-P has no video functionality. I never fully understand why Leica is not providing it, because some M cameras have it, some don't. And I think it's not a big effort to include it. But also typically you have on these classical rangefinder cameras, if you have video functionality, then it's typically 1080p. In contrast to the Leica Q2 or the Leica SL and SL2, which just hit the market, where of course you can get much better resolutions, let's say 4K, 4K cinematic, and different high resolution video formats. So here's an example how it would look like to mount a cinematic lens, in this case from Leica, with the PL mount on the Leica M10-P. And the PL mount is a very common format for cinematic lenses. You can purchase them from all kinds of manufacturers, including Leica and, for instance, also Carl Zeiss. It's nothing I'm going to use going forward, but it gives you the option, and they include this MPL mount adapter for free in the box. Somewhere in the future, I will make a special video on why Leica is so special, given the cameras, given the lenses. But for the time being, let's just quickly look at a few samples. And this one here has been shot with exactly that lens here, 35mm and f2.0. But you can also, of course, mount all kinds of lenses from the Leica lens universe on those rangefinder cameras. And the next one we are going to look at is actually a 50mm lens. And the thing about judging about a photo is that it's very much subjective, but my impression typically is that although these Leica M sensors have only in quote unquote 24 megapixel, their appearance in the image, if you have the right settings, is really sharp. So you don't need necessarily these high resolution cameras to actually get sharp and nice pictures which are suitable for large prints. A camera system in general is only as good as the lens system available to it, and the more lenses you have, the more versatility you have in choosing, different settings for different photographic situations. And since these Leica M rangefinder cameras are absolutely non-intrusive, they are also perfect for street photography. For instance, here is a picture I personally like a lot, and I also got permission from that painter here with his little notebook to actually take that photo. People photography is another application. In my personal impression and experience, these cameras and lenses just make perfect equipment for people photography. And somehow these photos always have a special look and special character. So if you liked my video, please give me a thumbs up. If you like my channel, please subscribe. Thanks for watching. And if you go out there with your camera, happy shooting.